Good morning everyone, and welcome to this presentation and breakdown of Roman Ruins Northern Forest asset pack that I made for the Epic FAB marketplace. So I will put a link in the description to the store. Alternatively, if you come from the store to this link here on YouTube, this will contain the information you need to see if this pack is anything for you or not. The point with this video is to show you exactly what the asset pack contains, so there are no surprises if you should decide to buy it. I don't want anybody to get something that they can't use or that doesn't meet the expectations that they were hoping for. I will also show you how all the shaders and materials and objects are constructed and built up, and I will give you some tips and tricks for bug fixing, some console commands that can be useful to use, and a lot of other useful stuff. So with that said, let's dig into it. When you have downloaded the asset pack and are opening it up for the first time, you will be met with this view. So you got the scene built up here with all the Roman ruin pieces and a lot of foliage, trees and bushes and stinging nettles, etc. Now the first thing that you might see is that it looks like it's boiling a bit. You can see here how it seems like it's not very stable, and that's the lumen for vegetation that's causing this. Now there is a fix for that, but I think it's still a bit of a problem for Unreal, and there are more work to be done to get lumen to work properly when you have a lot of vegetation. If you have a bit more sparse vegetation, you will not see this, but as soon as it adds up, you can get this boiling effect. But here's the trick: once I hit play, most of it is going to disappear. There's going to be a slight boiling effect still, but 80-90% is going to disappear immediately. So the fix is either I put in this command here in the console command to reduce it to this level, and you're happy with that, or you have to do the lighting for the foliage in the old school way, where you don't use lumen for the lighting. Alternatively, you can scale down the amount of vegetation you have, and it will look a lot more stable then. But that's where we are at the moment with this. But let's take a look around at the assets that you get here. So it's focused, of course, on Roman ruin pieces, and I got a few of them scattered around. So I got maybe 15 to 20 different types of pieces, and I got some bigger set pieces here that utilizes virtual textures. So these ones comes with UDIMs here, and also this pillar here comes with a couple of UDIMs. Now this is as much a package for foliage as it is for Roman ruin pieces. So all my Nordic forest style assets are going to go into this package as well. All the trees that I'm going to scan and build, and all the ground cover and all the plants, it's all going to end up here. And I just think it's a little bit more interesting if you get the Roman ruined pieces for free, or vice versa. You like the Roman ruin pieces and then you get all the foliage for free. So it's a double pack kind of. Let's take a look at the assets. So there's a lot of ruin pieces, of course, and they're all built as a volume, so you can turn them around and place them as you like. Push them down into the ground like so. Or so they're all enclosed, no open-ended objects here. And you got the foliage. It's used with the foliage system, and you can also use these objects, the rocks here, as with the foliage system. Getting a bit closer, you got the trees here. Now the trees are open in the bottom, and they are not moving. They are not reacting to wind at this time. That might happen at a later stage. And I got a couple of these different type of scanned trees here, all high res and high quality. Let's fly around. Got an old log, and a lot of small pieces here. I also have some bigger pieces. These ones. This one consists of a bunch of UDIMs, and the same for this. Or the ground here is also UDIM based, and this one also have a couple of UDIMs, 2 I think. Okay, let's jump into what I call the contact sheet. So the contact sheet is all the objects laid up. So you also have some instructions here, so you can read those. There are some tips if you run into some problems and you need to optimize things, and there are some console commands that can be handy. But if we look at the objects here, in the furthest distance here I got the big set pieces, and then all the smaller ones here laid out, and these are tree saplings, plants, and ground cover here. And over here we got the trees. Okay, let's take a look at the project settings. Since this is an asset pack, the project settings are not included. My project settings will not be the same as your project settings. It's all up to what you have in your projects when you started it. So let's check that we have the same. So it's all about going down to the rendering tab here, down there, and just check. So we are gonna see that we have texture streaming and enable virtual texture support enabled. That is for the UDIMs to work. And if we go a little bit further, you're gonna see we have lumen on, both for global illumination and reflection, and use hardware ray tracing when available should be on, and support hardware ray tracing to on as well. Nanite, it's all nanite here, so that one has to be clicked. And if we go further down, in order to get ambient occlusion, that one needs to be clicked in as well. Now when it comes to motion blur, I prefer to have that unclicked. It's actually clicked by default. To me, motion blur just looks like you have low FPS, and I don't think it really fits in a game environment. Let's take a look at some handy console commands. So I have them all here in the blueprint. So if you open the open level blueprint editor here, you will see got 2 console commands here. So what this does is that every time you hit play, these will activate, and then they will remain activated until you close Unreal Engine editor down. Then you have to play it again every time you start it up. But you can also use these commands here and put them into the console command tab here. That works just as fine, but then you also have to do that every time you start a new session. So what do I have here? Well, first one here is R lumen screen probe gather temporal distance threshold 0.1. So this one is the one that's going to reduce the flickering. So set that to a low number. 0.1 is quite low. That will reduce the boiling quite a lot. And I also recommend to increase the streaming pool size. The default streaming pool size is very, very low, and you will get a warning message, but if you go too high with the textures, they're just gonna look like very, very, very low res textures. So up this a little bit. I choose around 3000, usually it does the trick, but you can go even higher depending on your graphic card. Let's take a closer look at the objects and the materials and the textures. So if I choose one object here, and I will open it up in the editor, in the viewer here. So now we can see what it's made of. So it's got one texture, and it's made out of nanite. And it's got about 500,000 nanite vertices. I found 500,000 is a good number for these kind of objects that are not overly complicated but still retain quite a lot of detail. And if we go to the material, you can see I provided 3 materials for each. It's a 4K version and a 2K version and a 1K version. It's just so you can easily drag and drop these in if you need to optimize a little bit. And I think for an object like this, even 1K could be quite enough in many situations, but 2K definitely. 4K is very, very high settings. I did use 8K at one point, but I really think it's diminishing returns with 8K. I think 4K is probably the sweet spot for absolute quality. Only thing that happens with 8K, it gets just a little bit crisper, but it's not a big deal, to be honest. So let's check how I have built these materials. So at the bottom of it, it goes to a M standard master. They're all in the master folder here, and then you got material instances to build all these others here. So it's an albedo texture, it's a diffuse texture, and it's got an ORT texture, which stands for occlusion, roughness, and translucent. Occlusion is a little bit of ambient occlusion in the crevices. That needs to be activated in the project settings that I showed before, and it will only show up in special lighting scenarios as well. But it can help a little bit with especially architecture. Then you got roughness, that's the specularity, the most important one, and translucent is a little bit of subsurface scattering if there's anything green, like moss or a little plant or something in the texture here. Going up to the albedo, they all have little controls. You can adjust the tint. If you go down, you can also adjust the saturation, the brightness, and the contrast. Specular, it comes in at specular 0.5, so you can increase the amount you want it, lower or less. Normals, this will give it a little bit of a punch, or reduce it, or even invert it. Subsurface scattering, got controls here as well. You can adjust the saturation. Now I don't really have that much subsurface in this one. There's a little bit there, a little bit of mossy things. You can see them starting to glow there. And contrast. Let's take a look at the foliage. So here we got a tree, and if I go to the tree, open it up in the editor, you can see here that it consists of 3 materials. So you got the leaves here, and you got a tileable bark texture, and then you got the hero bark texture. So the hero bark texture is what goes into the bottom here. It goes all the way up to here somewhere, and then the tileable bark texture takes over for the branches at the top there. And the leaves are, of course, out where the leaves are. One thing you got to do with nanite trees is that you got to click the preserve area button here. What that does is that it tries to preserve the size of the nanite triangles at the leaves here, because when you have this many leaves and they're kind of small, they have a tendency to disappear over distance, but this keeps it from not thinning out too much. It still thins out a bit, but it's not near as dramatic as it would be otherwise. So click that one in. Let's check how the textures looks like. If I go here to that material, you got a foliage master, and that foliage master, then you connect these textures here. So you got the albedo texture for the leaves, and you got an art texture. So alpha is for the cutout for the leaves, roughness, the specularity, and the reflectivity, and translucent is to give it a bit of a shine, to have that see-through effect that you get from leaves when the light goes through it. And then you got a normal texture here as well. One thing I got to show with the normal textures is just be careful that they are turned the right side. So normally when you create a texture you would use OpenGL, but it's a game engine this, so we're using DirectX here. So what you need to do, if you notice it looks a bit funky, then check that this flip green channel is clicked in, and that would turn it in the right direction. If I turn that, you might see that it flips the other way. So that would do a whole lot of difference. So all of my texture at this point is requires the flip green channel to be pressed. Go back to this. You got the same controls here that we had before with the SSS, subsurface scattering, and all the other controls. It's exactly the same. And the same goes for all of these other plants as well. They're kind of built up in a similar way. So the landscape, so it's made with the usual just painting using the brushes in Unreal Engine here. So just sculpted like this. So the more action happens in the painting here. So I got a grass texture and a grassy rock texture and a variation of the grassy rock. So let's see what that looks like, because I'm using displacements here. Let's make it a bit smaller. So if I paint with this one, that should be just plain grass. You can see those disappear. And if we want to add in some rocks, you got two versions of the rocks here. Now you need to enable displacement if you're using Unreal Engine 5.4 or less. I think it is enabled by default in Unreal Engine 5.5, but or else you got to type in these commands here. The foliage. So you just drag and drop all the foliage you want into this scene here. And I try to make the naming as usable as possible, so you can easily filter things out here. If you want something called ground cover, you could type in ground cover and it should filter out all the trees and everything else, and you can just select these and start painting those in. What's next? So I'm continuously building on these packages. So there's more that's going to happen in this package very soon. So when I scanned these on the location in Croatia where I was, I actually scanned around 80 of these little rocks, and I think I've brought in something around 20 at the moment. So all of the other ones, all the other pieces needs to come in as well, and that's going to happen very, very soon. And I'm also thinking of updating a little bit around in the landscape here. So I want to have a new type of ground, a little bit more of a leafy ground, so that kind of stuff. And I have a bunch more trees to bring in and a few more plants as well that's going to come. The biggest thing I'm going to change very soon is that I'm going to go to a new location. So I have found some locations outside of Rome that I'm going to go and do some scanning. So hopefully I can get something there and get some bigger hero pieces in. That's what I'm looking for at this point. I think I have enough of small pieces, but I think it lacks a little bit of the bigger set pieces that could add something to this. So that's going to happen in the very near future. So if you like this kind of content, you're into 3D and stuff, then why not like and subscribe and see what happens with this package and all the other stuff that I'm making for Unreal Engine. So with that said, I hope to see you around next time.